You know how sometimes you get exactly what you've dreamed of, but the moment doesn't feel anything like you imagined? That was me, sitting in my brand new office at 29 years old, surrounded by confetti no one else had walked on. The lights were still too bright, everything smelled like fresh paint and new carpet, and the silence felt so heavy it almost hummed. I had spent months preparing for that night, the grand opening of my company. My company, the thing I had been working toward for almost 10 years. There were catered platters, champagne, background music, the works. I even had a little speech written out ready to thank everyone who had helped me get here. But when 6 o'clock rolled around, I ended up thanking nobody but the caterer. Every chair in that room stayed empty. The food sat untouched, and I just picked at a plate so it wouldn't all go to waste. It was supposed to be the biggest night of my life, the night things finally turned around. My name's James, and honestly, I've always been that guy in the family. The dependable one, the one who never made the scene, always showed up, always helped out. Birthdays, graduations, emergencies, I was there, even when I couldn't really afford to be. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Kyle, well, he was the star, the charismatic one, the one who could make a mess and somehow have my parents call it ambition. When he dropped out of college after 2 semesters, they said he was finding himself. When he lost 3 jobs in a year, it was because he hadn't found the right fit. And me? I worked through school, pulled double shifts, saved every cent I could. I lived in a studio so small I could touch my desk and my bed at the same time. Every dollar I tucked away was building toward this dream, something real, a company with my name on it. So, yeah, that night should have meant everything. And yet, all I could hear was the faint echo of my own footsteps, wondering why the people I'd always shown up for couldn't show up for me. But here's where things get interesting. It wasn't just about them not being there that night. That was only the beginning. Let me back up a little. For as long as I can remember, I've been the fixer, the peacemaker, the guy who holds it all together when everything else starts falling apart. Family birthdays, holiday dinners, if something went wrong, I'd get the call. Even when I was just scraping by, I was the one loaning money. I'd skip real meals for a week to help my parents cover some bill or bail Kyle out of one of his learning experiences. So when the company finally started coming together, when I signed that lease, picked out the furniture, ordered my first set of business cards, it felt like every sacrifice was finally about to pay off. I thought, this is it. This is the moment where they finally see me, not as the backup plan, not as the safety net, but as someone who made it. I sent out invitations weeks ahead, digital ones for everyone, and physical ones just for my parents, because I knew they'd say, oh, we didn't see the email. I thought of everything: a small catered spread, music, champagne. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. And when I stood there in my best suit, waiting for anyone familiar to walk through the door, I kept telling myself they'd come. But as the hours passed, that hope got quieter and quieter until it was gone completely. By the time I was cleaning up confetti at midnight, I didn't even feel angry, just empty. And then my phone buzzed. It was from the family group chat, a photo of Kyle and my parents smiling in front of a brand new barbecue grill, champagne glasses raised. The caption said, "Housewarming success." That was the moment something in me cracked. No, sorry we missed it. No, congrats, James. Just them celebrating somewhere else like my big night never even existed. I stared at that photo for a long time, then quietly packed up the leftover food, turned off the lights, and headed home. But that should have been the end of it, only it wasn't, because the next morning I woke up to a text that changed everything. The text was from my mom, just a few words, but they hit like a hammer. "We need to talk about profits. Your brother says he deserves a cut." Profits? I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold beside me. It took a moment to connect the dots. My brother Kyle was asking for a cut of what exactly? My company hadn't made a single dollar yet, not one. I hadn't even finished onboarding my very first clients. But suddenly, there it was, this feeling that my years of grinding and saving was somehow just a family potluck they thought they could help themselves to, like Kyle had some claim just for being times family asterisk. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat there, overwhelmed by a wave of exhaustion, not just from the night before, but years of being taken for granted. I could already picture how the next conversation would go. Mom insisting family comes first. Dad saying Kyle needs this more than I do. And Kyle? He'd probably have a list of reasons why his help or inspiration entitled him to a cut. For the first time in a long time, something inside me hardened. That text wasn't just a question, it felt like a warning shot. I had a choice: roll over like I always did, or do something different this time. So I put my phone down, poured another coffee, and started thinking about boundaries, respect, and finally standing up for myself. I didn't reply that day or the next. Instead, I watched the family group chat light up, with more photos of Kyle's housewarming, more laughs, inside jokes, none for me. Each message was like adding fuel to a quiet fire burning inside me. By the end of the week, Mom sent another message. James, answer your phone. This is important. When I finally picked up, what I said next made her go completely silent. She launched right in: no hello, no how are you, just James, we've been trying to reach you for days. I stayed quiet longer than usual, just enough for her to feel it. What's going on? She pushed, like I was the one acting strange. Mom, I said slowly, choosing words carefully. You're asking me about profits, but none of you showed up to my company's launch. There was a long pause. I pictured her standing in her kitchen, hand on hip, annoyed at being challenged. James, she said, that voice, patient but condescending, the same one she'd used since I was a kid. You know how important Kyle's housewarming was. Everyone was there. It wouldn't have been right to split up the family over one night. One night, I repeated, my voice flat. This wasn't a dinner party. This was times my business launch asterisk, something I'd worked toward for years. She sighed like I was overreacting. You're making too big a deal out of nothing. Kyle is just starting his life with Emily. You'll have plenty more events. Then she went back to the profits. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that made her pause. Profits. Mom, I haven't even signed my first client yet. She kept talking, ignoring me completely. Well, Kyle said, since he inspired you to start your company, he deserves some sort of founder's share, or at least a family discount, because he wants to use your services for his own projects. That stopped me cold. Inspired me? I asked incredulously. Mom, I've been planning this since college. Kyle didn't even know about it until last month. She just kept going, pretending I hadn't said anything. Look, your brother is trying to build his life. You're single. You don't have kids. You can afford to be generous. Think of this as helping the family. Helping the family. That phrase hit me again times helping the family asterisk. I told her I had to go and hung up before she could say another word. That's when I knew this wasn't going to blow over anytime soon. My parents didn't see my company as mine. They saw it as their family's new resource, and Kyle was first in line with a plate, ready to take whatever he wanted. After that call, things just kept getting worse. Kyle started texting me directly, asking for more favors. Hey, bro, one message read, can you hook me up with a partnership package? Like, I'll promote your company to my friends, and in return, you give me a lifetime free account. Fair? I stared at the screen, baffled. Promoting Kyle? The guy who'd never promoted anything except his own parties? I didn't reply right away. When I didn't, Kyle sent another message. Mom said you'd probably say yes. Just let me know what I need to post. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't respond at all. Then Mom called again. James, why are you ignoring your brother? He's trying to help you grow your business. I stayed calm and asked her if she realized what Kyle was really asking for, free labor. She brushed it off like I was overreacting. It's just family, she said. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But the family group chat told a different story. One night, Kyle sent a photo of his new patio furniture, captioned, Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the loan. A relative replied, What about James? Didn't he just launch something? Mom chimed in, He's stressed. He'll come around. They were having entire conversations about me, about times my times money and times my times company right in front of me, like I wasn't even there. And then came the kicker, an invite to Kyle's networking barbecue. James, You should come, Mom said brightly during a phone call. Lots of people there could be good for your business. I asked who would be there. Oh, just some of Kyle's friends, people from his gym, Emily's family. Bring some business cards. I nearly laughed. They'd skipped my launch, but now I was supposed to show up at Kyle's party and beg his friends for business? No thanks. I didn't go. That night, they sent a group photo of the whole family standing around the grill, captioned, "So much fun. We missed you, James." But "we missed you" stung way more than I expected. Like it was my fault I wasn't playing along with their narrative. And then came the final straw. 2 weeks later, I got an email from my accountant. Someone using my mom's email address had asked about adding a family partner to my company's banking account. They didn't have access, of course, but just knowing they tried made my stomach drop. I called Mom immediately. "Oh," she said, sounding annoyed. "I was just trying to make things easier for you. This way, Kyle could handle some of the finances and take the stress off your plate." I was quiet for a long time before I finally said, my voice low but steady, "Mom, don't ever do that again. You don't touch my accounts. You don't ask about my accounts. This company is times mine asterisk." She huffed. "You don't have to be so territorial. We're just looking out for you." But I didn't believe it anymore. I hung up, sat in my office, staring out the window, the city alive below me, people making choices, building their own lives, and here I was, letting my own family treat me like a child. For the first time, I thought seriously about what it would mean to set real boundaries, not just saying no once, but making sure they couldn't take from me again. The very next day, Kyle sent me a new text. "Bro, did you see the new patio heater I bought? You should come check it out. Also, when are we getting that family discount? Dad said you're being stingy." Something inside me shifted. He didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started going through every single account with my name on it, joint streaming services, shared utilities, even the old family phone plan. I made a list because if they thought they were entitled to everything I'd built, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. And I wasn't going to warn them this time. The next 2 weeks were brutal. I was onboarding my first real clients, working long nights in the office, drinking too much coffee, eating takeout, and feeling proud despite the chaos. For a moment, I thought maybe the family drama would die down if I kept my head down and focused on work. But it didn't. That weekend, early Saturday morning, my phone started buzzing like crazy. First Mom, then Dad, then Kyle, then Mom again. I groaned and rolled over, ignoring all of it. Then a notification popped up on my company dashboard, a flagged access attempt. Someone was trying to log in from an unknown device. My heart dropped. I sat up in bed and scrambled to check the logs. Sure enough, 3 failed login attempts, all from an IP address suspiciously close to my parents' neighborhood. Someone had been trying to break into my business accounts, and it wasn't casual. They were guessing passwords. I called Mom immediately. "Oh, good. You're awake," she said, like this was just another normal Saturday. "We were just talking about how to get you some help. Kyle and I thought you were working too hard. If we had access, we could handle payments and invoices, make things easier." "You tried to log in?" I asked flatly. Silence. "You tried to get into my company account?" I repeated, voice rising. "Well, yes, but only because you've been so secretive lately," she replied defensively. "We thought maybe you were overwhelmed. This way we could—" "You had no right," I snapped. "None at all. You don't touch my company without asking." She sounded offended. "James, you're making it sound like criminals. We're your family. We just want to help." "Help?" I laughed bitterly. "Mom, you skipped my launch. You gossiped about me in the family chat. You demand money I don't have. And now you try to break into my accounts. That's not help." There was a sharp sniffle. Her voice got that edge I knew too well. "You're ungrateful. Your father and I raised you, supported you through school, and this is how you repay us?" I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to breathe. "You didn't pay for my school," I said quietly. "I did. You didn't support me when I was saving for this company. You barely knew what I was doing until last month. That's not the point, she said coldly. This family shares everything. You've been acting like you're better than us, hoarding your success. It's selfish. I didn't trust myself to say more. I just hung up. 10 minutes later, Kyle texted me. Really, dude, Mom says you yelled at her. Chill. She was just trying to make sure you don't mess things up. Also, I told Emily we'd get that family discount, so don't make me look bad. I put down my phone, shaking. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about boundaries anymore. They genuinely believed there were times entitled times to what I'd built. And by Monday, things escalated again. When I got to the office, I found an envelope shoved under the door. Inside was a handwritten letter from my dad. James, we've been patient with you, but your attitude lately is unacceptable. Your mother and I think it's time you start giving back to the family in a real way. We propose a family stipend 15% of your monthly revenue to be shared fairly between us. I gripped the letter so hard the paper crinkled. My father, a man who couldn't even attend the most important night of my career, was now times formally times demanding a cut of my revenue times before times expenses before salaries. It was so absurd I almost laughed, but the laugh caught in my throat because I knew they were serious. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, running through every time I'd bailed Kyle out, paid his rent when he blew his paycheck on some business opportunity, co-signed a loan for his car only for him to miss payments and wreck my credit. Mom calling me crying because he'd gotten in legal trouble again. Every time I had shown up and this was how they repaid me, trying to worm their way into my business times before times that even had a chance to grow. The next weekend, the final straw arrived. I was out grabbing lunch with a friend when I got a notification my office alarm had been triggered. My stomach lurched. I rushed back and found Kyle outside the office, fiddling with the keypad. What are you doing? I demanded. He jumped, guilty for a second, but then plastered on a grin. Relax, man. Mom said you wouldn't mind if I grabbed a few things. I told Emily I'd show her around your office. You tried to break in? I said cold. It's not breaking in if it's family. He shrugged like that made perfect sense. I stared at him, unsure what to say. You need to leave, I finally said, careful with each word. He scoffed. Wow, really? You think you're too good for us now? I stepped closer, voice low and steady. If you ever try this again, I will call the police. His grin faltered. You wouldn't try me. He muttered under his breath as he left. When the door shut behind him, I locked it and stood there, hands trembling. That was the line they'd crossed from disrespect into violation. The rest of the weekend, I ignored every call and text. I sat at my desk, going over every system account, security settings, tightening everything down. Because now it wasn't just about boundaries, this was war. If they wanted to treat my company like their personal ATM, they were about to find out what it meant when I shut the door for good. Not long after the break-in attempt, Monday morning brought another shock. I arrived at the office to find an envelope pushed under the door. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father. James, we've been patient with you, but your attitude lately is unacceptable. Your mother and I have talked, and we think it's time you start giving back to the family in a real way. We propose a family stipend, 15% of your monthly revenue to be shared fairly between us. I gripped the letter so tight the paper crinkled. My dad, the same man who hadn't even bothered to show up for my company's grand opening, was now formally demanding a cut of my revenue, not profits, revenue, before expenses, before employee salaries. It was so absurd I nearly laughed. But the laugh caught in my throat because I knew they were serious. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every time I'd bailed Kyle out of trouble, covering his rent after he blew all his money, chasing some business opportunity, co-signing a loan so he could buy a car only for him to miss payments and wreck my credit score. Mom calling me in tears because Kyle had gotten into a bar fight and needed money for legal fees. Every single time I'd been there for them, and this was their payback trying to worm their way into my business times before times that could even truly begin. The final straw came the next weekend. I was out grabbing lunch with a friend when I got a notification that my office alarm had been triggered. My heart sank. I rushed back and found Kyle standing outside the office door, fiddling with the keypad. "What are you doing?" I demanded, voice echoing down the hallway. He jumped, caught completely off guard, but quickly plastered a guilty grin on his face. "Relax, man. Mom said you wouldn't mind if I grabbed a few things. I told Emily I'd show her around your new office." "You tried to break in?" I said, voice cold and steady. He shrugged. "It's not breaking in if it's family," he said like that. Made perfect sense. I I stared at him, unsure what to say. "You need to leave," I finally said, careful with each word. He scoffed. "Wow, really? You think you're too good for us now?" I stepped closer, voice low and steady. "If you ever try this again, I will call the police." His grin faltered. "You wouldn't try me," he muttered under his breath as he left. When the door shut behind him, I locked it and stood there, hands trembling. That was the line. They had crossed from disrespect into violation. The rest of the weekend, I ignored every call and text. I sat at my desk, going over every system, accounts, security, settings, tightening everything down, because now it wasn't just about boundaries. This was war. If they wanted to treat my company like their personal ATM, they were about to find out what it meant when I shut the door for good. Not long after the break-in attempt, Monday morning brought another shock. I arrived at the office to find an envelope pushed under the door. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father. "James, we've been patient with you, but your attitude lately is unacceptable. Your mother and I have talked, and we think it's time you start giving back to the family in a real way. We propose a family stipend, 15% of your monthly revenue, to be shared fairly between us." I gripped the letter so tight the paper crinkled. My dad, the same man who hadn't even bothered to show up for my company's grand opening, was now formally demanding a cut of my revenue. Not profits, revenue, before expenses, before employee salaries. It was so absurd I nearly laughed, but the laugh caught in my throat because I knew they were serious. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every time I'd bailed Kyle out of trouble, covering his rent after he blew all his money chasing some business opportunity, co-signing a loan so he could buy a car only for him to miss payments and wreck my credit score, Mom calling me in tears because Kyle had gotten into a bar fight and needed money for legal fees. Every single time I had been there for them, and this was their payback trying to worm their way into my business times before times it could even truly begin. The final straw came the next weekend. I was out grabbing lunch with a friend when I got a notification that my office alarm had been triggered. My heart sank. I rushed back and found Kyle standing outside the office door, fiddling with the keypad. "What are you doing?" I demanded, voice echoing down the hallway. He jumped, caught completely off guard, but quickly plastered a guilty grin on his face. "Relax, man. Mom said you wouldn't mind if I grabbed a few things. I told Emily I'd show her around your new office." "You tried to break in?" I said, voice cold and steady. He shrugged. "It's not breaking in if it's family," he said like. That made perfect sense. I stared at him, words failing me for a second. "You need to leave," I finally said, measured word by word. He scoffed. "Wow, really? You think you're too good for us now?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "If you ever try to get into this office again without my permission, I will call the police." His grin faltered for the first time that day. "You wouldn't try me." He muttered something under his breath and left. When the door clicked shut behind them, I locked it tight and just stood there, hands trembling a little. That was it. They had crossed the line from disrespect to outright violation. The entire weekend, I ignored every call, every text. I sat at my desk and went through every system I had, business accounts, personal accounts, security settings, and tightened every single one. because now it wasn't just about setting boundaries anymore. This was war. If they wanted to treat my company like their personal ATM, they were about to find out what it really meant when I shut the door for good. Write next two sections in exact words. Count after breaking point. Monday morning hit me like a truck. I didn't wake up sore, but my chest, stomach, and head all felt heavy, like I'd been carrying a weight I could no longer put down. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone buzzing nonstop. Mom called twice, then Dad, then Kyle. Each voicemail got angrier, more desperate by the hour. James, Mom snapped on the latest one. Your brother said you threatened to call the police on him. This is ridiculous. You need to apologize before this family falls apart. I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted it without a second thought and poured myself a coffee. For years, my family had been my safety net, even with all their chaos and entitlement. They were loud, manipulative, and entitled, but they were still family. I was trained from childhood to put their feelings first, to keep the peace at all costs. But this time, keeping the peace was eating me alive. Tears started running down my face quiet, hot tears that blurred my vision. Not full on sobbing, just a deep ache. I rarely cried. I trained myself not to, but that morning I felt hollow. Like all the energy I'd poured into building my dream had been drained by the very people who were supposed to celebrate it. I called in sick to the office that day. My assistant covered for me while I sat on my couch with my laptop, not working, not watching TV, just staring. Eventually, I opened the family group chat and scrolled back through months of messages. Every sarcastic joke at my expense, every time Kyle got praised for doing the bare minimum, every time my parents brushed off my achievements like they were no big deal. And as I read, something started to shift inside me. At first, just anger, sharp and bitter, but underneath was a deep ache. I'd bent over backwards, trying to earn their approval, to make them proud. And it was never enough. By the end of the day, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to try anymore. The next few weeks were brutal. I started avoiding family events completely. If mom called, I let it go to voicemail. If dad texted, I ignored it. I worked late hours, sometimes sleeping at the office just to avoid seeing them, but the silence didn't make things better. They doubled down. Mom showed up at my apartment one afternoon knocking like she owned the place. When I opened the door a crack, she immediately started in. James, this is childish. You can't keep cutting us out just because you're upset. Your brother is hurt. He was only trying to help. Trying to help by breaking into my office? I asked, voice tired. You're exaggerating. She brushed it off, waving a hand. He just wanted to see the space. You should be flattered. He cares enough to get involved. I stared at her. For the first time, I didn't feel the usual guilt pulling me back, just distance. I'm busy, I said, and shut the door before she could respond. That was the turning point. I wasn't going to be the family's fallback anymore. This was my life, my company, my dream, and I was finally learning to say no, not just with words, but with actions. For the first time, I understood that peace wasn't about pleasing everyone else. Peace was protecting myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Looking back on everything, it's clear to me now that this wasn't just about a company launch or money. It was about respect, about being seen for who I am, not just as a backup plan of the family bank. For years, I lived trying to please them, to keep the peace. I thought that if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally be proud of me. But sometimes, no matter how much you give, it's not enough for the people you want it from most. And that's okay, because at some point, you have to put yourself first. Building this company has been a journey full of late nights, self-doubt, and hard lessons, but it's also been a journey of learning to stand up for myself and protect what I've worked so hard to create. I'm still figuring things out, setting boundaries, saying no, standing my ground. It's not easy, but it's necessary. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. You deserve to be respected. Your dreams, your work, your life, they belong to you, and no one has a right to take that away. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing that the people closest to you aren't always the ones who will support you the most. And that's when you have to become your own biggest supporter. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated, or if you've had similar experiences, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want to hear more stories like this. Take care of yourselves, and remember sometimes, peace means choosing yourself.